Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Hello, and welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show. I was recently talking with a leader, we'll call her Kayla, who is struggling with someone on her team. We'll call him Drew. And Kayla's concern was that she'd been working very intentionally with a lot of time and energy with Drew for several months, and she just wasn't seeing the performance that she needed. And before she frankly fired him, she wondered what else she might do to try to help Drew level up to where she needed him to be. So I asked Kayla to walk me through some of the things that Drew was doing or not doing that were concerns. And she mentioned things like he was consistently late to meetings. Not a lot, 3, 5, 8 minutes late, but enough that it was disruptive to the meeting. He would sometimes, if he had a one-on-one meeting with people, or it was just him and one other person, he would message those people like a couple minutes before the meeting, say, hey, can't meet right now, let's reschedule. And it was just very disruptive. She mentioned things like his work products would come in usually on time, but sometimes late by a day or two. And then they weren't always quite what Kayla expected. She always felt like she had to double check the work to make sure it was right. And then sometimes send it back to him to say, hey, can you rework this part of it? Because it just wasn't correct. And in general, she felt like he wasn't doing his best work, but that wasn't really that wasn't objective enough. The objective part was that it needed rework or it was late. So that was fair. So I asked about his skills and experience, and it was pretty apparent to Kayla, and the way she explained it, apparent to me, that Drew had all the skills and experience he needed, that he'd actually been there for a number of years prior to Kayla becoming his leader. And so presumably he knew what he needed to do the work. It just wasn't at a level that Kayla expected. And she was frustrated that, again, this coaching didn't seem to be leveling him up. And so Kayla's company has very well-defined and well-communicated core values. So if it's not a skills issue, it's probably a culture fit issue in my experience. And so I asked Kayla to walk me through how she would grade with just a letter grade, A, B, C, D, Drew's fit with those core values. And as we walk through of 3 of the 5 core values, Drew got, in Kayla's opinion, a C or a D. And we agreed that that's not the kind of report card that you want for people on your team. And so I suggested to Kayla that she step back, review that report card, and write down some notes about some examples that supported her letter grade. Make sure she felt good about the letter grade. Maybe it shouldn't be a D, it should be a C or C minus or whatever, but make sure that she had examples and felt like she had defensible reasons why she gave those letter grades. And then go and take that to Drew and walk through that core value report card with him to see what he thought. Because in my experience, when a company defines their core values, which I always encourage you to do, if you don't have core values, you absolutely need to get core values. As Seth Godin says, people like us do things like this. And the core values really define what people like us are going to do and how we're going to do it. You want to have that defined for your team so they know what's expected in terms of behavior. Culture is just a collection of our individual behaviors. So what are those individual behaviors that we're looking for to build the culture that we're looking for so that people like us do things like this? This is who we are. Not necessarily what we do, but who we are. And then that does lead to we do things a certain way, not necessarily like the work products, but the way we interact with each other, how we behave with each other, all those things. So the point being, when companies define those things after they already have a team in place, well, then sometimes there's a misalignment. as you would imagine. Once it's defined, well, this is how people like us are going to behave. Some people are like, oh, well, I don't actually align with that. So maybe this isn't a good place for me to work. And in my experience, people will self-select off the team. They'll quit. And that's okay because you defined your core values for a reason. You want everyone on the team to be aligned with those. And so the people that aren't aligned, you want off the team. And it's often much smoother and easier if they quit than if you have to fire people. But ultimately, you need your team to be aligned around your core values. And so in companies that define them after a team is there, sometimes they find there's misalignment. And when people don't self-select off, well, then you have to have conversations. And essentially, this is what was happening with Kayla and Drew, because while Drew had been there for a number of years, they had, after he started, defined their core values. And so Kayla starts now after the core values are already defined. And she sees Drew as now, ultimately, after this conversation anyway, as not a culture fit, or at least looking like he might not be a culture fit. So I suggested that she go refine and define and confirm that report card and then sit down with Drew and just have a conversation. Hey, Drew, as you know from these conversations we've been having over the last months or so, your performance just isn't where it needs to be, because maybe that hasn't even been communicated. So make sure he knows, because the last thing you want when you're having to have a termination conversation with someone is that they say, wait, what? People should not be surprised that the performance issues have gotten to the point that they're about to get fired. It shouldn't be a surprise. Now, maybe they're not going to be happy about it. I've never had anyone in a termination conversation say, thanks, that's great. I really appreciate the way you walked me through this process and got me to this point where I'm getting fired. No one says that. You're not looking for that. What you're looking for is people to say, yep, you're right. We have talked about this. I'm not surprised that this is where we are. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed with myself. Maybe they're a little mad at you. They don't think you did everything you could have done. That's okay. Again, you're not looking for a hug at this point, but they're acknowledging that this isn't a surprise, that we have walked a path that got us to this point. So back to Drew and Kayla, I said, start with just your performance isn't acceptable. And then make clear that you believe that his skills and experience are sufficient for him to have sufficient performance. So if he has skills and experience to perform, but he's not performing, well, then that's where we're going to look at the core values. Let's look at the core values and what's expected of how you do your work, Drew, and how you show up for the team. And frankly, literally, how you show up for meetings or don't. You cancel them. You're late. What does that say to the team about your respect and alignment with the core values? And so just have that conversation with them. I said, and be open to one of two outcomes. Either he's going to say, whoa, wow, I didn't realize that. I didn't even think about that. I know we have the core value of say, in this case, put others first, but I didn't realize that that meant be reliable and show up and be on time. And I was thinking more, it meant just like, hey, if somebody needs coffee and you're going to the kitchen, bring them back a cup, or if you're coming in together, hold the door for somebody. And it might mean those things, but it doesn't primarily mean those things. So he might just say, yeah, I didn't realize that it really was more focused around like be on time, because that shows respect for other people and putting them first. So yeah, I guess I've just drifted a little from the core values. Let me get back on track. And this might be the wake up call that he needs. So I suggested that she walk through those and see how he responds. The other response I said, be prepared for is, yeah, ever since we've come up with these core values, I've been uncomfortable. No one's really said anything, so I didn't say anything, but I've never really liked them. I don't really like, again, just stay with put others first as a core value. I've never really liked put others first. I always thought that felt a little wishy-washy. And, I just think everybody needs to just do their job. And if everyone does their job, it doesn't matter. And, whatever. You don't know what he's going to say, but something along the lines of like, yeah, I've never really bought into these. And that's okay that we've gotten to this point and now he's acknowledging that. What's not okay is to be from this point forward saying, well, we'll just keep kind of doing this the way we've been doing it. This is the inflection point. This is the time that Kayla needs to say, well, Drew, I appreciate that you haven't always aligned with these things, but if we can't get you in alignment and what you're telling me is you just fundamentally don't align with these core values, well, that doesn't make you a bad person, but it definitely makes you a bad fit. And that means you can't work here going forward. So let's talk about the transition plan. I'm not mad at you. I'm just actually glad we figured out what was going on and why your performance didn't seem to get where I needed it to be. And we need to move on. That's okay. But I encouraged Kayla to be prepared for that. Now, in this specific situation, I think it's actually going to be the kind of wake up call that Drew needed to say, oh, I didn't realize how my actions were being perceived. And I guess I have drifted from some of these core values and I can get back on track because I do align with them. I do buy into this. I just drifted off a little bit. So thanks for bringing this up. But in the end, this isn't a skills and experience issue. This isn't a technical problem. This is a people, culture, values kind of problem. This is that people like us do things like this. And right now, Drew's not doing things like this the way we do it here. And so he needs to get aligned or we need to do something different. So for your company, for your teams as leaders, make sure you've got your core values defined. And if you don't have core values defined, get them defined. Figure out what they are, write them down. This isn't a one-day project. This isn't a weekend thing. This is over a couple of weeks and months thing. We've got lots of other videos and resources to do that. There's lots of great books about core values. Jim Collins is an excellent resource for that if you want to look up good to great. But the point is, you've got to define how you're going to behave. The core values are the how. The core purpose and who we serve for customers, that's the what we do. But how we do it, that's core values. So you want to have those defined. Then you need to communicate those. Not only what they are specifically, and you want to get them kind of short and crisp. Some people have one-word core values. Some people have short phrases, like I've been using the example of put others first. Nice short phrase. But it could be interpreted to mean a lot of things. So in addition to the what they are in their short little form, you want to have a kind of what they look like, more descriptive. So put others first. We're humble. We have some humility in meetings and don't interrupt people. We are reliable. We show up on time for meetings and give notice if we can't, or whatever. Just flesh it out enough that people go, oh, I understand what we mean by that. And that might need to evolve over time too, as people misinterpret or misunderstand what we meant by that core value. We can redefine and rework those definitions. The idea is you want to communicate the specific what it says so people can remember them. And then also, what does that mean? What does that look like? And you need to have that awareness that when people aren't in line with those, you got to call out those gaps. If you allow people to drift and be misaligned, well, then there's really not a point of having core values. The idea is it keeps us rowing together in the same direction, doing things the same way as people. And people like us are doing things like this. Well, if you don't keep that in front and center, well, then people start to drift. And so when you see those gaps, you got to call them out as a leader so that people have a chance to improve. Again, people are going to do one of two things when you call these gaps out. They're going to either say, yep, you're right, I've been drifting. Let me get back to it and put that more front and center in my work life. Or they're going to say, yeah, you know what? I've never really agreed with that or aligned with that. I don't really like that. I don't think that's me. And that doesn't make them a bad person, but it does make them a bad fit. And you need to figure out what the separation path looks like for that. And then go into transition. Let's figure out what are we actually doing to move you off this team? And maybe you're a big enough company that they can go on to another team, because maybe these were more departmental or some kind of business unit core values, not company-wide core values. And so there might be another place for them at your company, or more likely you're a small company, you have your core values and this place isn't a fit and they're going to need to go somewhere else. So culture and core values are critical. Often people have the skills that they need to do the work, but they're not performing at a level that you need them to because there's some core value misalignment. So as leaders, we need to be really dialed into what those are, make sure they're communicated and defined and understood. And then we hold people to those. And when there's some kind of a misalignment, we're in transition. Good luck doing this stuff. It's important work. Kayla and Drew are going to work this out. And one or the other thing is going to happen. Drew is either going to get back on track and continue to be a great teammate for Kayla and grow and develop, or he is going to find that there's not a fit and move on. So thanks as always for joining me on the Clarity Advisor Show, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity Advisors Show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.